Hello, welcome to this Wednesday's Travelin' Young, and it's a Josh-only episode. Sorry about that, guys, but I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience taking Danish. Not in Danish, this is going to be in English, but now that I've gone through enough classes, people have been asking questions about our experiences. I thought that it was worth sharing a little bit of that. First note before I begin, some of what I say applies to any language. Not specifically Danish. Danish is a more difficult language to learn, but I'm not a language learner, so any language would be difficult for me to learn. So I don't think it's a Danish specific thing, but I wanted to make that point. And then the topics I want to talk about is why I waited to learn and start taking classes. Second is the process of the classes that I'm taking. 3 is learning in general, which I think is important to think about because I needed to learn my style, why I was struggling, and what I need to do in order to get on track. And then lastly, what my plan is going to be on track, because I want to take the language exams to be able to get permanent residency and just become better at Danish. So starting off, why we waited to learn. So we've talked a little bit about like visas and why we're here and all that stuff in past videos, but to just say it one more time around the language part. My visa does not require me to take Danish classes at all. Some do. Ours does not, and that's because the primary purpose of the visa that I have is to be here working, and that is the priority. And if you saw the video that we recently did about how we struggled and almost left at one point, you'll know that I was struggling in the first job that I had when I was here. And since that was so critical to make work, adding language classes on top of a job that I was struggling at was just not something that made any sense, especially when I didn't even know if I was going to stay in Denmark. And if I wasn't going to stay, investing all the time in trying to learn a language that I'm not very good at while struggling at my job just is not the right set of priorities. Everybody has different priorities for sure. Everybody's different. In my case, I really needed to make the job work because it was so difficult for me. And I'm not going to go into that again because I talked about it recently, but I had to focus on that, the pressure of making sure that my job was okay because that was necessary for all of us to stay here. Made that my focus. The little time I had, I couldn't spend multiple nights a week in Danish class to start with. So that's why I waited. But then in the end of 2019-ish, when everything was back on track, as we talked about in a recent video, we decided that we would take classes. It didn't start until 2020 because we knew we were going to move and we wanted to move to the new neighborhood so that we can take classes close to where we were living. It's a little complicated, I think, if you change communes because they help with the tuition and everything. So we started in 2020. And the process of how these classes are constructed. So there's 5 modules so by the way, in the visa that we're in to get permanent residency, there's a couple different kinds tracks that you would take. In ours, there's 5 modules with the intent of at the end being able to pass what's called the PD3 exam. And each of those modules, let's say on average, could take 3 to 4 months. And there's classes 2 nights a week. So it's like graduate school. There's homework. So basically 4 nights a week I'm doing something. 2 of them I'm in person from 6:30 to 9 o'clock in Hellerup or Lyngby, depending on which place I'm at. And the other nights I'm doing homework. And it's a lot of commitment to do these things. And I'm currently in module 3. So what happens is module 1 is kind of the basics, moving on to module 2. After module 2, I did not pass the exam, which means I couldn't move to 3 until I retook a portion of the module again, and then I retook the test, and then I moved to 3. And I recently did not pass module 3 as the test, and I'm now retaking a few classes to take the test again in June. And that's kind of what can happen is if you can't move to the next module until you pass a test that shows your level of proficiency. And then when you get to 5, the test is actually the one that the government provides as part of residency. And the goal, again, is to try to prepare you for that. So I'm in module 3 now, and I'm starting to realize that what I need to do in my style to learn. And I want to talk a bit about learning in general because I think this is critical. And it took me a while to hit it because basically in college and a lot of stuff I've taken, I was always able to focus on things that I was good at and that I enjoyed, like math. I learned math well. Engineering, I could sit and tinker with something for like 2 hours. To me, it flies by because I'm having a great time. But if if I'm doing something like language that I don't enjoy, 5 minutes feels like an hour because it's just painful because I'm not into it. And so I never really learned how my style of learning and what I needed to do to succeed at language learning until I've been going through this process. And I want to mention real fast somebody named Saul Khan. He has, if you don't know who he is, I'm going to link below to one of his TED Talks about learning. And it's super interesting because the idea is basically you need to master something in order to move to the next level of proficiency. And that level might just be the next concept. And a lot of things that you learn require mastery before moving. But the way that education is, and the systems of education that includes these language classes, is it's a train that's rolling regardless of if you've mastered something or not. And if you need to master to build upon what you're learning over time, and you never master those initial concepts, you're going to fall behind, like way behind. And I never had that issue so much in math because that's something I enjoy and I was naturally better at math. But in this case, I'm learning the things I didn't master in those first 2 modules are catching up to me now, and I'm struggling. And it feels like everything's moving at warp speed and I can't keep up. And so I went to help visualize this further, not just my hands here. I went to Bakken the other day, and I think this horse race game at the carnival section of Bakken really illustrates the best what this means. So here, all of the horses are basically starting together at the race. But then you'll see as the race progresses, some horses get to the end of module 1, although they're still kind of clustered. But then as they get further and further down, they're spreading apart, which means some are learning, in this case, using this kind of metaphor, faster. So some are up to the end of module 3 here, but there's still some at this proficiency in module 2, and that's me lagging behind as these other horses are moving. And the classes are designed for the ones that are moving quickly more than they are for the ones that are struggling, because we shouldn't hold them back. But you get to the end of the race here, and look, there's some that are still stuck in like a module 3 proficiency, which is where I am, which means if I pass this test in June, which I think I could because it's basically reading and writing, which I'm better at than listening and speaking. If I get past that, I still think I'm going to be struggling a ton because there's a lot of things that I'm just not ready for. I'm that horse stuck in the middle when others are way, way down the track. And so I've decided what my plan is to pause. After I get through this test, hopefully I pass it this time. And I feel like now that I've done it once, I know what I need to focus on. I'm going to stop for a little while in the classes, and then I'm just going to do some self-paced learning to catch up. I've bought all of the books that I've taken for each of the classes so far. I'm going to go through all those exercises again to try to build on the core that I feel like I didn't master, that I should have mastered. I'm going to work with Maya to help me a little bit and talk to her some. We're trying to talk a little bit more at home in Danish and text a little in Danish to get this generally better conversationally. And also, I've learned I need to write stuff to master it, because I can't just memorize from reading. That just doesn't work for me. So what I've done is I actually bought this Danish book on castles, which I like castles. If you didn't know, you probably know if you watch us. And it's cool because it's got like each page depending on how big it is a story in the history of each of these castles. There's like 150 it talks about across all of Denmark. But this is in Danish. So what I'm doing is I'm taking each page and I'm handwriting every single word on that page. And then the words that I don't understand, I'm translating into English and then writing the English word on top of the Danish word. And then at the end of every couple pages, I'm going to go through and kind of build a list of the ones that I needed to translate and then just work on memorizing that. Although there's a lot that's repeated in this book because it's all the same concept of castles. So I'm already a couple pages in, seeing repetition and learning words just by doing that. But physically writing them is helping me a ton. And I just have to mention, by the way, just to call out, I got this remarkable thing, which is amazing, because I was writing so much, and I'm kind of OCD that if I don't like the way it looks, I erase it and write it again. So I had to like eraser stuff. It was driving me crazy. So I have this now, so I can handwrite, and then I can more easily go back and review the stuff that I've written and reread things and make sure I understand it in my own handwriting, which feels like it's helping me retain the information and the vocabulary better, because I need to build the vocabulary. That's a primary thing I'm missing, because working on grammar when you don't know enough vocabulary just doesn't make sense. And trying to understand how to deal with verb tenses when you don't know enough verbs doesn't make any sense, because verbs look super complicated when you conjugate them in different forms if you don't even understand the root form of that verb, right? And some of them are, as if you know Danish, have special cases on how they are, so super tricky. So I'm pausing right now. I'm going to go back, relearn, and focus on mastering the things that I never mastered that I should have. And I'm going to handwrite stuff and go through exercises, handwriting. Also, by the way, I'm going to try to dictate some of the exercises in the books. People are reading things, so I'm going to try to dictate to understand what they're saying, and handwrite those. And that's going to be my focus until I feel like I've caught up to where I should be. And I'm a horse at the end of the module versus one way behind. And then I'm going to start module 4 again and hopefully be at a better pace. But if I need to pause again after that, I'll do the same thing, because my goal is in December of 2023, I want to take the PD3 exam so that I can get permanent residency, because I fulfilled the other requirements except the language test and the culture exam, which is going to be in Danish, so I need to know Danish well enough first. And then I feel like I'm going to learn more culture in this castle book, and also all the things we've done traveling on the channel. I feel like I would do well at that if I could understand just Danish. Anyway, so that's the plan. That's the story. And yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. It's not my favorite thing to do, although I like the challenge part of it. And I like learning new things. It's just such a time commitment. That can be challenging when you're trying to manage work and all the other stuff, because without work, we can't stay here. So it's critical that we perform well at our jobs, which is why, as I mentioned, we decided to wait a little while before we started to actually take the classes. So let me know what you think. If somebody out there is actually taking language classes now, how's it going for you? How is, if you're gonna come here and you, what worries you, or what do you think about with language classes? What languages do people speak that speak Danish? Because I think it's fascinating when people can speak multiple languages. So if you're a Danish person, what languages do you talk? Tell me in the comments. I think it's interesting, because now that I'm learning this, and everybody at my work, because I work with people in France, speak French, I would love to be able to learn French and be able to speak to them. I'm curious if when I get to a certain level of Danish, and I start tricking my mind on how to do these things, can I maybe learn another language faster? And if so, maybe I'll learn French, because I communicate with a ton of French people, and I'm often the only non-French speaker on the phone calls, and they speak English just for me. So anyway, if you know more languages, let me know. I think it's interesting to know what kind of languages people can speak. I think it's super fascinating. Anyway, that is it. I hope you enjoyed my little recap of Danish and learning and all that, and watch Saul Khan, link below. It's super fascinating. The stuff he does with his Khan Academy is really, really cool. If you haven't ever seen his things before, I saw him speak once at a conference and I was blown away. Check him out. But for that, I'm going to say goodbye. See you later.